Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you to all of you. These have been two very busy days. I have admired your stamina in so many committee meetings, plenaries, the side events. We really do very intensive work here. And I think many have said we've met in very challenging times. I think I would say even unprecedented times. And it was very interesting to hear the political opinions of the representatives of 1 billion citizens in the OSCE, especially in this time. You know, I came to this meeting a little bit discouraged from my last visit to Kiev and seeing in the eyes of my friends in Kiev their reactions to some statements that were coming in. But today I've heard that there is the representatives of the public opinions in Europe, in the North Atlantic, in the space that goes from Vancouver to Vladivostok, who can express very strongly their opinion and also hopefully make their governments hear. So I thank that very much. And I would like to thank also for the strong statements that we've heard here from the US delegation, both yesterday from Mark Weezy and Joe Wilson today. I would like to thank you, Madam President, for convening us today here, but also in particular for inviting Vladimir Kara-Murza. I think this morning was a very touching moment. A person who has suffered a very unfair treatment for his political beliefs. And I would like to also publicly thank Congressman Cohen, who has so much worked for this result. He would have liked to be here. I met him 2 weeks ago in Washington. He expressed his disappointment for not being able to be here, but of course his happiness to see that Vladimir Kara-Murza addressed us today, and this moment, I think iconic moment for us in this assembly. And thank you, Madam President, to also keep on inviting guests that make our assembly a little bit higher also in the major media, let's say. I would like to thank all the members. If you read the reports of the President, my report, and all the reports of the special representatives and heads of ad hoc committees, the amount of activities that you have managed to do. I mean, we are just reporting here from Dublin autumn meeting to today. I mean, it's 4 months with a holiday in between, but the amount of activity is incredible. I think the Secretariat is trying to keep pace with all the activities that the President and other leaders are trying to suggest to us. I hope the Secretariat is servicing well all these activities, but I really thank you, Madam President, for keeping us very busy. I thank all the members of the Bureau who were in Kiev last week. As you said, Madam President, this was a unique event. President Stefanchuk, the President of the Ukrainian Parliament, mentioned that it was the first time that a parliamentary assembly held a statutory meeting in their parliament. It was indeed the first time also that the OSCE ever held a bureau outside its headquarters, apart from one that was hosted by Portugal in 2008, I think, during the presidency of João Soares. So thank you very much for the Bureau members and the members of the PSTU who made the trip to Kiev, as was recorded here this morning. I think it was a very good testimony to the fact that we were there while some concerns were coming from outside Kiev. And I thought that our presence there also gave some comforts to our Ukrainian colleagues. I thank the members who are also have gone to Serbia, who are about to go to Tajikistan in this field of activities that you, Madam President, together with Andreas Baker, have triggered again in the OSCE. We used to do them some years ago. This is a very good activity and very welcomed by the countries where they host election OSCE field missions. So also the people from the OSCE who work on those missions really appreciate parliamentarians coming and see their work. And as being someone who has served in OSCE field operations for 10 years, I remember how much I appreciated when members of parliament would come to visit Bosnia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia, where I was serving. I would like to now move on to a little bit to the election, because there was a big election debate before. And Daniela De Ridder mentioned what are the lessons learned from this period of many elections. So I'll take it from there and suggest and go maybe through those who have comments to propose what the Secretariat has been doing in terms of lessons learned from the last election observation missions. So we will introduce a new election compact. We've already started to work internally in the OSCE. We feel that, as many of you have said, election is not only the election day, working on the election observation, but it's a longer-term process. So from the selection of the leadership, which is normally an exercise that the president does on the advice of the secretariat, once a leadership is selected in the person of the special coordinator appointed by the CIO and the head of the OSCPA delegation, the secretariat will start to engage with these two leaders and try to also have a meeting between these two leaders and the entire parliamentary delegation of the country where we observe. We've actually done this meeting this morning with the Albanian delegation. So we just had this morning and we've started already to implement this new compact. Then, in order to better prepare our leadership and to make sure that our leadership is fully equipped with all the necessary knowledge of an election observation, we will organize pre-electoral visits. We've done this sometimes in the past, but we will try where it's possible, and of course, provided that the resources are there, to do this on a regular basis a month before an election observation. So bring the entire leadership together with our staff and meet all the election stakeholders in the country where we observe. And then the month that goes from the pre-electoral visit to the actual election operation is a month where the leadership can get acquainted with what's happening, as seeing the local players on the ground. So we'll be better equipped once we are in the ground to engage with the other electoral observers, but will have the tools to better understand the reality on the ground. A lot has been said about our partners, the ODIHR, the parliamentary assemblies of Council of Europe, NATO, and the European Parliament. I would like to stress the priority, I think, from us as OSCE institution is to preserve the integrity of the election observation by strengthening the ODIHR. The ODIHR does an incredible work. They send people on the ground for 2 months, professionals who are deployed throughout the countries, who are in the capital. People who have done elections, you will see their CVs sometimes on this leaflet that you are given when you go to an election observation. They've observed elections in a plethora of countries. So they are the ones on the ground who get the real serious assessment of the situation. We need to work very closely with the ODIHR. Our leadership needs to engage together with the ODIHR and strengthen the ODIHR. I've heard a lot of reports following some elections that, because you're not happy with the election results, calls to change the methodology of the ODIHR. I remind members here that in the past, the calls to change the methodology of the ODIHR were really the issues that sometimes were used by some participating states who don't like the ODIHR and the OSCE entering into observing their elections. I will not name countries here, but you know the ones I'm referring to. So I would not feed into this narrative, but I think we need to strengthen the OSCE, ODIHR. In terms of cooperation with the other parliamentary assemblies, we have a peculiarity in the Parliamentary Assembly, Madam President, is that your appointment of the leadership is non-partisan, although sometimes we try to find balance between the political background of the leadership. But by fundamental choice, we try to have a gender balance, a geographical balance, also political balance. But the exercise that once you have appointed a person to this leadership is not a partitic, let's say, exercise. The person is there with its own integrity, makes a judgment, regardless of whether in that country they have a political party affiliated friends, whether they are socialist, EPP. And mind that in the OSCE, which is a region that goes from Vancouver to Vladivostok, there is at least 35 countries who do not enter into this logic, very, let's say, Brussels or Strasbourg center of EPP, ALDE, so there are other countries. So we have to make sure that access to leadership is granted to all the countries, but that also the strong component of political affiliation is diluted in our assembly, because in other assemblies it's very strong. In the Council of Europe, you will have the leadership of an election observation, which is selected exactly based on your political affiliation, and it goes on a rotation. So in one election, you will have a head of the mission from EPP, the next one will be Socialist, ALDE, and then they rotate. So It depends on which mission you are assigned to. And this, I think, would be clever to avoid in the OSCPA because we are not so much Brussels-centered in that sense. Some comments on the election debate this morning. Cooperation with PACE and NATO-PA, we try to cooperate as much as possible. I think your meeting in Strasbourg will be very important also to make sure that we keep the integrity of this exercise. And as you said, Madam President, the scientific approach to this, because we don't want to be drawn into political battles when we make an electoral assessment on the ground. Words has been mentioned about the election process in Ukraine. We discussed this last week in Kiev. You will remember also that in the Minsk Accords, Madam Merkel mentioned elections will be something that the OSCE will take care of. I would caution really on the role of the OSCE in an eventual post-conflict situation in Ukraine. The OSCE can do a work of election monitoring, but running an election, and I've been an election international observer in Bosnia where we were running the election, we were the administration. I don't think that this is going to be possible because of finance, because of security in Ukraine in the future. So we must be very careful when we think that the solution to a future election in Ukraine will be a role of the OSCE. Pascal Alizar, you mentioned follow-up to election observation. Also, Pere was mentioning this. Exactly, this will be part of our compact. So a pre-electoral visit, a mission on the ground, and then the follow-up. I think it's very important that we engage, especially if we have made some recommendations in some countries, that we call the country that we have observed into accountable, and that the country develops let's say, a secure path to implement the ODIHR recommendations that the ODIHR makes normally in its final assessment. Countries who deny visas to observers. Thank you very much, Sarasan, for these remarks. We have in our code of conduct, a very stringent code of conduct, of course, for our own observers. But it's true that the country who is being observed cannot decide on the selection of which are the observers. So we must make sure that I think we do mention it in our final report. Maybe we should also mention it publicly in the press conference, as you have said. I don't know what other tools we have. I would not always go for the, let's say, the nuclear option of withdrawing the mission, because I don't know if that is useful at all. But we've had this challenge and we will look into it. I think I've covered most of the issues on the election part. A few other points, Madam President. I would like to say that the Secretariat, which I have the honor to lead, and with the Standing Committee gave me again the responsibility last July in Bucharest, is doing an excellent job. I mean, I would like to thank here publicly all my colleagues. I think some of you have already mentioned them, but they do a fantastic job in the so many activities that we are doing, and I think they really deserve a word of praise from all of you for the great work that they do, and I'm very proud of leading this team. I would like to thank Johan Buser for your kind words and for your leadership in our finances. I'd like to thank actually publicly Gustavo and Stephen, who are the ones who are mostly involved in the budgeting and in the administration of our assembly. I think we have really developed with Gustavo and Stephen a very frugal approach to our finances. We have managed to do a lot of activities with the limited resources, and also I'm very much appreciating all the advice that was given to us by the external independent audit, Deloitte. This is the third year that we do it in a row with Deloitte. I think they give us very good advice, but I'm pleased that the report also this year was very positive for us. The OSCE as a new leaderships, you've seen them in the meetings from the new Secretary General, the new ODIHR, the freedom of the media, and the new High Commissioner for National Minorities. I've already engaged with them. I've created excellent relationship with them. I'm very encouraged by this leadership. I think that we can work with them very well. In conclusion, I want to thank, as the Treasurer did also, the countries who are contributed to our budget, but also giving extra budget contribution, Austria in particular, and Denmark for hosting our 2 offices in Copenhagen and Vienna, and all the countries who are providing additional funds for secondments, but also who have reached the 10,000 euro limit that was requested in one of the OSCE resolutions. This is it from my side, Madam President. Thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership. I hope that we will be busy until July, and we will look forward to working with you until the end of your term. Thank you.